We're going to review codes for electrical wiring, and it's important, actually, it's very useful to kind of direct our thinking to the requirements of the code when we talk about electrical wiring, because we're required to understand that code and to apply it and to label our drawings for our contractors correctly. And there's a few rooms in residential buildings that need specific attention. Um, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the laundry room. They require additional 20 amp circuits. As I discussed before, those 20 amp circuits can have that special outlet that has the twisted blade on it to supply more power. But generally, we're anticipating the use of appliances in these rooms that draw more current, whether it be in the kitchen, a refrigerator, a toaster oven, in the bathroom, a hair dryer, in the laundry, like an iron or some other device like that. So these convenience products that are plugged in typically happen in these three rooms, and the code takes special attention on what happens in those rooms. And in other rooms, the code is actually much more flexible about how it is supplied with power. But there are some important things that you need to know right away to lay out rooms when you're trying to describe an electrical arrangement. And in this case, we're looking at a plan view and the idea of spacing of electrical outlets on the wall. So take note of the icon here for an electrical receptacle. The idea of the spacing is so that in this case, no appliance, no light that's placed in the room is more than 6 feet away from a receptacle. And so in this case, we have the 6 feet and these odd conditions sometimes that occur. And the code kind of allows, is thought into that to figure out what might be required for long expanses of windows that might need other outlets placed along them. So one of the mistakes that's easy to make is to take that idea of the 6 foot distance for a power cord and think that that's the requirement of spacing. But the requirement is that the appliance be no more than 6 feet. So you can go 6 feet either way, unless you come up with the 12-foot spacing. And I'm not saying that that's always going to be what the code is. That's typically what the code is currently. And when we get to kitchen, the spacing changes. And so here we are in kitchen layout. We still have the same icon for the receptacles. This is very typical that a kitchen now needs to have two 20 amp branch circuits to it, but it also needs these it typically has these appliance circuits. In this case, the refrigerator is located. And you'll notice that each one of these outlets is labeled as a ground fault circuit interrupter. And that's a safer outlet device to prevent electrical shock, used in wet locations or in other hazard type locations. And we'll go into depth on how those actually function to protect. But this outlines this idea of no appliance more than 24 inches. And so we have along the wall, if we had an appliance here, our first outlet would be 24 inches away, but our next one would not need to be 2 foot, but could be 4 foot. So a 2 foot requirement allows us to space 4 foot apart. And then there are obviously the conditions that are created when we are dealing with sinks, ovens, and other things that interrupt the countertop surface. And then there's a special condition for what happens at countertops. Hallways have a 10-foot spacing for outlets. I don't know if I have a graphic for that. But these are the minimums of code. You may find it advantageous to think these out and increase the spacing or the density of the outlets that you want to place. You know, typically in a hallway, we're thinking about a plugged-in vacuum cleaner and the idea that they have long extension cords or long cords on them. So we can do most of the use of an appliance in those spaces. I'm going to pick up next on the ground fault circuit interrupter, and I'll do that in the next video section.